Hello, gardening friends. Today is Sunday, April 23rd, 2023, and Miss Mimi and I are out early this morning. I've just made some cinnamon rolls. I've got them, just took them out of the oven. They've got to cool for a while before I can ice them. And I'm having my coffee. It's a beautiful, cool spring morning. We don't get very many of these, so I'm going to sit and enjoy this one a little bit longer. Miss Mimi enjoys being out of the house. Oh, goodness, let's see. I haven't done a lot of gardening this week. This was a week of cooking. I had friends call and friends visit, and so I've been cooking up a storm. I made my first cherry pie. Came out pretty good. And made some chicken marsala one day and made a large meatloaf another day and a couple of casseroles. So I am cooked plumb out, but I have a lot of leftovers. Here you can see my rose garden is doing really well. The fertilizer seems to have perked them up. I did the late frost that we got a few weeks ago, did nip a few of the branches. I noticed this morning there are a couple of branches in there that need to be cut out. It's been a while since I talked about my banana trees in the backyard. You can see they have come back. I had told you how they had pushed up one of my boards in the deck, and two of them were coming up underneath the deck, and we had to dig those out, ripped one of the deck boards up. And in any event, let's see, here's one banana. There's another batch that's come up. It's actually two stalks right next to the deck, which is good. They'll live nicely there. And I believe there are two more that have sprouted up out here. Yep, 1 and 2. They're rising above the aspidistra. The sun is just beautiful this morning. Miss Mimi is beside herself. Oscar has hurt his leg, and so he's not as dominant as he usually is. So he hasn't been beating her up lately. She still can't stand him. She hisses at him all the time. But she's a little more, shall we say, fearless this morning, because she knows she can outrun him. My Spanish moss does indeed seem to be live Spanish moss, because every time I wet it or it rains, it does turn a nice green color. So there's a very good chance that it will live here. I don't know if it's going to stay in its present configuration, but at least it helps cover the trunk up some. There is a little bit of activity since I last talked to you about my cycads. Here you can see this is starting to send up a stalk in the middle, as well as this side. So it just takes a little while if they're in the deep shade of the north side of a fence. Here you can see I did notice even in the front yard, my caladiums are starting to come out of the ground. These were planted, oh, these are probably 4 or 5 years old. I had a dozen in a circle. I only see maybe one over there and these two, but considering they're kind of like old friends, they just keep popping up every now and then. Here's where I planted the elephant ears. I've spread them around the property in pots. I will never plant them in the ground again because they're very invasive. And I'll see sunny or shady exposure if it really makes a difference to those. I did notice here is where I planted the cutting that I took last fall of my white angel's trumpet, the base of which is next to the cutting. I was actually almost going to throw this cutting out because it had a large curve in it, and I cut it back while it was still in its winter home in my garage. And when I did that, it didn't seem to like it, and almost all the leaves fell off, and there was just a little bit of growth on the tips, and I figured I have nothing to lose, so I planted it outside. And this is about 2 or 3 weeks later, so it did catch. It's remarkable how resilient these plants are. My Phatzahedra is sending out bud. I was unsuccessful last year in trying to, I'd got a cutting to root, but I couldn't get it to grow. It just died out. I cleaned up around the statue of David this week. Got the dead out of the Fatzias. I am going to have to fix David. During Hurricane Katrina, a branch landed on him and broke both legs. And I have pieced him back together again with hydraulic cement. And I think a couple of weeks ago, we moved him because I had to how can I say this? Grab the base of it had sunk into the muck, into the dirt. And so we had to raise the base about a good 6 inches. In order to do that, we had to remove the statue from the plinth. And unfortunately, he cracked again. And so I'll have to get out the hydraulic cement one more time. You do want to use gloves, by the way. It's a chemist in me coming out, because cement is very basic and will burn your skin very easily. I'm about ready to take out these wild, oh, there's a bee working them over. Maybe I won't take them out today. The wild spiderwort. Reason why I'm thinking of taking it out now is that I have a light at night here, and the spiderwort blocks the light from hitting the statue. My Ozark plum is leafing out. You probably can't see it all that well because it's kind of spindly, but I think plums tend to be a little, oh, it's the right word, flimsy looking. It's not going to ever be a really big tree, but hopefully I'll get some fruit on it. I have had plums in the past and they have fruited. This is just all really growing together nicely. I'm not really going to do anything to this garden this year. I had talked about possibly moving the 2 evergreens at the base of this palm, but I've just decided to leave them. Here you can see the male cycadus. Doesn't look like it's gotten any bigger since the last time I showed it to you. I did notice this last week, and unfortunately they picked this cycad to do it, but I had a new crop of the bugs from hell, the great big black grasshoppers. Only this time of the year they're nice little soft black grasshoppers. And they were all over the base of this cycad, so I got my gloves out and squished probably 50 of them. But there'll be more, and they'll come, and they love to eat. The flowers that they love particularly are daylilies and amaryllis. They'll come from miles around to eat amaryllis, and if they get big enough, they can pretty much cut a half a leaf a day. You're just totally gobbling it up. My snowball viburnum in the very back corner did not bloom this year. However, it is green and it's got a lot of lush new growth on it, so maybe next year. It should have bloomed by now. I am going to have these fall flowers. I'll think of the name of them in a minute. I planted them late last fall. Chrysanthemums. And you can see they're about ready for a spring flush. They'll bloom in the spring and they'll bloom again in the fall. It looks like I may have finally lost my palm. It's doing pitifully in the middle, and that's okay. That was a what kind of palm was it? A kind of Mediterranean fan palm. and it was about 6 foot tall. It was paired with the one in that corner, and it was next to a big oak tree. And when the big oak tree was removed, they hit the palm and it broke the growing point, and these are the little shoots that came off the side. So these palms are the same age, that tall one and the stub of a one, which was a sprig off of the bottom of the other palm. So you can see there's really only one growing tip in a palm. I probably shouldn't have encouraged that to grow, but I'll have to go ahead and dig it out. Palms, fortunately, are easy to repot or replace or whatever, because they have very shallow roots. Even a palm tree like this Phoenix canariensis could be dug out. I wouldn't dig it out by hand, but it could be dug out and moved. These, on the other hand, are not shallow rooted. They're supposedly, oh, Mimi's running. I bet you Oscar must be coming back here. But the, oh, what is this palm called? I forgot what it's called right now. They're very hard to propagate, and I could see why. Because when I dug the roots up, even though the top of the plant was small, like here, believe it or not, that has about a 5 foot long root about the diameter of my arm underground. It's shallow. It goes along the ground. I put it towards the big palm. And these are small because I cut them back. I took the entire canopy off a couple of, is it last year or the year before? A couple of years ago. And I didn't kill them. However, it did stunt the growth, which is perfect because that's the size that I wanted them to be. And I can't think of the actual name of it, but it's basically a saw palmetto. It's not supposed to form trunks, but it does. So let's see, what else? Well, it wasn't Oscar. Mimi's come back. She wants to go in now. Hopefully I'll have this. Oh, I got my fountains on. This video will go long enough so that I can ice my cinnamon rolls and have breakfast. I do have to admit on this side that I do like my little trough. First time in 20-some years, I finally found a spot for it. I'm thinking I may actually put it up on a cinder block to raise it slightly higher to the eye. But it really gives you a chance to appreciate all of the sedums that I've planted. That's my bay tree. I cut it back. You can see all the new growth on the top. And the leaves that I took off when I made the cutting, I dried them on top of my refrigerator. I have a mortar and pestle up there. I just threw them in the mortar. And they've dried nicely after, it's been about a month. And it's basically a jar's worth of bay on the couple of branches that I cut off. So that's not too bad. Already basically got my money back that I spent on the plant. Miss Mimi is saying, what are you doing out here? It's cold. I want to go in. Bougainvillea is still doing nicely. The flowers start out small and are getting bigger and bigger, which is nice. Here in the far corner, I never did get to splitting this, and I may just leave it as it is this year. That's my toad lilies. Hadn't quite figured out a spot to put them. If I could have thought of a spot, I would have moved them. And you can see here, I'm going to attempt to make another ball on the top of this topiary. I have to admit I've made a mistake when I bought these topiaries. They're pretty. I've had them now for about 3 years. But when I put them in this pot, ooh, Miss Mimi is feeling frisky today. When I put them in this pot, I had anticipated them being bigger. And when you buy a topiary, that's basically as tall as it's ever going to get. You know, you basically just maintain the shape unless you do like what I'm trying to do which is add another tier to it. So that's my advice if you're going, if you see a beautiful topiary, keep in mind that's probably as big as it's ever going to get. So if you're happy with it, fine. On this side, I have to wait a while. Oh, I wonder where this stick came from. Oh, it's part of one of my trees. Unfortunately, this topiary I've got to wait because the very center is the branch in there and it hasn't sent up a sprout yet. You do kind of want to pick a central stalk to encourage. Here my lilies are still smelling up the place over here. The wandering dude is filling out nicely. I did slightly move my hummingbird feeder because the old place was right over the top of that Lenten rose and it kept spitting out bits of the sugar water, discoloring the leaves. It wasn't hurting it, but it just made it look bad. And there is my, what is it, the peach-colored angel's trumpet. You can see it's still getting attacked by slugs and snails. It has to rise out of the aspidistra in order to be protected. It outgrows them, the slugs and snails. It grows faster than they can eat, thank God. Either that or they hallucinate after they've chewed on the leaves and forget where to come and eat. That plant is extremely poisonous, and it is also hallucinogenic. I remember reading a story of, it was in an old gardening book, of someone nibbling on a leaf, and it said that they ran around, and this was like in colonial times, they ran around and acted like a chicken, is what they described the person as, for about 2 days before he calmed down. He did live. So it is hallucinogenic. However, it is also poisonous. And the trick is, you don't know how much will do either, to make you high or kill you. And it's going to vary on the person and vary on the plant. So don't eat your angel's trumpets. Right, Miss Mimi? She's ready for her close-up. The only plant that I really am not comfortable with, I'm trying to see, I don't have any leaves down here, thank God, because it has died back, but it's my neighbor's oleander. Oleander, there are a lot of poisonous plants. However, oleander is particularly poisonous. One of the little green leaves from an oleander can kill a 200-pound male. So you don't want to even nibble on a leaf. The other thing that's bad about them is if you burn the leaves, the toxin is in the smoke. So if you burn the leaves and inhale the smoke, that too can be deadly if sniffed in large enough amounts. But that's about it for today. I think my rolls are probably cool enough now for me to ice them, and I'll reheat my coffee and have a little breakfast. Have a good day. Till next time.